Give me big old buckets of butterbeer. Give me big old barrels of butterbeer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butter beer.
Hello and welcome to the Three Broomsticks. We invite you to pull up a chair, grab a butterbeer, and settle in for a hearty discussion about Harry Potter. And I'm Ev McLaughlin.
I'm Sophia Jenkins.
And I'm Irvin Cateman. And I'm so excited that today we have invited back one of our esteemed regular guests, Dr. Louise Freeman. Louise, always so good to have you with us.
Well, I'm excited to be here too. This is always a great place to sit back and have butterbeer with friends and talk, talk Harry Potter today, I guess. Last time it was Strike, but today it's Harry Potter.
Yes, today for the first time we're going to have you on a Harry Potter episode instead of a Strike crossover. So it's very exciting. I mean, obviously everyone here knows your Strike bona fides, cause you run the iconic Farting Sofa Lounge. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey in the Harry Potter fandom?
All right. Well, I am the mother of two, what some people would call Generation Hex kids who were born at the perfect age to read Harry Potter as kids when it came out. My kids were born in 96 and 99. So I was introduced to the series when, my daughter was probably second grade or so, and she wanted to start reading it, and we were still reading aloud to her at bedtime then, so I started reading Sorcerer's Stone with her. She loved it. We almost immediately, this was about the time, I think, Order of the Phoenix was published. So we went to the midnight release parties and all that type of stuff. And then my son, who's about 3.5 years younger, wasn't old enough then. So about, I guess it's probably 2.5 years later, I started the series with him. So I was, at that point, I was like reading, Order of the Phoenix, I think, with my daughter, and then starting the series over again with Sorcerer's Stone with my son. So I've read the entire series aloud twice. So that's a lot of talking.
Very impressive, because especially Order of the Phoenix.
Yeah, I really do think that is the best way to experience it, particularly to experience it for the first time, is to read it to a child and see it through a child's eyes. Because as much as we grown-ups, some of us rather old grown-ups by now love the series. Its initial audience was kids, and seeing it through those eyes is just a wonderful experience. I really think that is an amazing thing. I did get interested in the psychology of the series, and as a psychology professor, I started going to conferences and writing papers about psychological elements of the series, and that led into some research on the psychological effects of reading the series, and kind of expanded into an entire research program that I'd never expected to do on young adult literature. I was a behavioral neuroscientist. I studied brains and behavior, but I wound up with this side project on young adult literature that really wound up kind of taking over my academic career, which was sort of fun. But I'm retired now, continue to enjoy Harry Potter. I enjoy the Hunger Games, just read the latest of those books. I'm going to be blogging about that soon. And of course, I blog quite a bit about Cormoran Strike now.
Yeah. Louise, I'm actually curious about your kids. So, your older is born in 1996. So
yes.
That's the same age as Sophia. That's growing up with the series. The one born in 99, who is very clearly like Gen Z, and, sort of wasn't old enough to sort of grow up with Harry. Does that kid have the same, like, attachment to Harry Potter as the older one? 'Cause I'm curious, like, if it's the same, like, investment in the series, if you didn't, like, grow up with it and wait for years and years between books.
Well, he really, I'd say he was did sort of grow up with the series. I mean, he was the one who went with me to the Book 7 release party. Actually, his sister was away at camp, so she didn't get to go to that one. Now, he was only about 7, and he actually wasn't at Deathly Hallows yet. I think we were at probably Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix. We were not yet through the series. I was at that point with my daughter, but I think he was on an earlier book, so we weren't planning to read it immediately. But he still, had his Harry Potter robe that he was wearing to the bookstore party. Actually, at one point he got lost for me, and I was trying to get an employee to help me find him, and they asked, well, what does he look like? I said, well, he's a 7-year-old boy. He's dressed as Harry Potter.
That really narrows it down.
That's like, well, so are 2/3 of the other kids in here, so it didn't really help much. But I did find him. But he dressed as Harry Potter one Halloween. He dressed as Lord Voldemort one Halloween a few years later.
Covered the whole range.
He had, I think for his 7th or 8th birthday, we had a Harry Potter party. That was right around the time, I remember, because the decorations were Order of the Phoenix movie decorations. So that was about that time. He certainly anticipated the movies and went to the movies when they premiered. So yeah, I would say he was old enough to grow up with Harry Potter. Now, he eventually broke my heart by deciding he liked Percy Jackson better. But we've reconciled, and he eventually got me to read the series, and I understand its appeal now. In fact, I had him listen to the 3 Broomsticks episodes on Percy Jackson and Harry Potter, so we enjoyed those together. So but I think
so lovely to hear.
To get a kid who really hasn't grown up with them, I think you'd probably have to get to like more born in the mid 2000s, 2004, 2005, because now part of it may have been he had his older sister, of course, who was, more in sync with the books, but yeah, that's his story.
I love that. You heard it here, folks. Our crossover episodes are bringing families together. When we went to Universal, he was the one who wanted to buy the wand, so we just bought one wand, and he let us try it a few times, but it was his wand. He has gone with me. Let's see, what did he go to me with? He goes to me regularly to the Queen City Mischief and Magic Festival, which is our local, entirely generic and not Harry Potter wizarding festival.
Of course.
Happens every fall.
Yes.
So I would say he is as much or more of a fan as my daughter.
Love that. Well, we are so glad to have you on today, because today, for episode number 64, we've gathered to discuss the deaths in the Harry Potter series that may not have been all they appeared.
Dun, dun, dun.
Thank you. So if this panel sounds familiar, listeners, it's because it's the same panel as episode 61, which was our Cormoran Strike crossover. And without going into spoilers, there was a death in the 7th Cormoran Strike book that some fans think may not have been suicide, but may have been murder.
I would say there are at least 3 fans that think it's suicide and not murder. I haven't found any others yet. So just so you know.
Yes. So if you like that, if you like this theorizing without knowing the answer yet, we highly recommend listening to episode 61. But basically talking of, that death and whether it's all it appears, got us thinking about the deaths in Harry Potter that weren't all they appeared. That fans, were convinced they weren't dead, or there was, something more going on, there was foul play. And so I thought it'd be interesting to sort of go over that, a sort of, trip through the Pensieve, into ye olden days of Potter fandom, when we really didn't know who was dead and who wasn't. And so we have, some recommended reading for that. And honestly, the most important thing one could read is dumbledoresnotdead.com by Dave Haber. This was sort of the definitive resource on theorizing that Dumbledore was not in fact dead after Half-Blood Prince. He marshaled all the evidence, laid out all the theories, and was even mentioned by Jo Rowling herself. So the website is still up, but to really get like a sense of what this looked like pre-Deathly Hallows, I recommend going to an archived version of it from like 2005 and just like basking in, the crazy conspiracy theories. It's so well done. And yeah, before we dive in, we want to give a huge thanks to, Carolina Oberlander over on our Patreon, who bought us this round of drinks at the pub. So yay! Thank you, Carolina. Listeners, if you want to buy us around at the pub, please head on over to patreon.com/3broomsticks with the numeral 3 to sign up. We're offering bonus content, chats with the hosts, on-episode shoutouts to our patrons, all manner of fun stuff happening over there. And honestly, we'd really appreciate your help in keeping the lights on at the 3 Broomsticks so we can talk about death for a long time to come. And now it's time to raise a toast. So today we are going to be raising a toast to the comments on episode 61, which was our Cormoran Strike crossover, all about whether you-know-who really killed herself. Not Voldemort, for context, but not that far off. So for the next, 5 minutes, there are going to be major strike spoilers for the next, for all 7 books that are currently out. So if you don't want to be spoiled for Cormoran Strike up through the Running Grave, please fast forward a couple minutes, and we'll catch you on the flip side of this. But yes, so this episode was all about whether or not Charlotte killed herself, and if she didn't, who done it. So first, I will say we ran a poll on the website to see who people think killed Charlotte. And so out of 22 votes, we have 1 for Amelia, the sister who makes such a good suspect. 1 for Jago, who is pretty obvious. But is he so obvious that no one suspects it? 2 for her brother Valentine, which is my guess. And 18 for Charlotte killing herself. So it looks like Nick, Jeffrey, and I did not manage to convince most of our listeners. However, we raise our toast to a commenter who came up with another option that we didn't think of. So, raise a toast to Absent-Minded Raven, who said, "One option you don't have on your poll, but who knows Charlotte well enough to convincingly fake a suicide? Cormoran Strike. Dun dun dun! It will eventually be revealed that he was also responsible, although maybe accidentally, for his mother's overdose. The series finale will be him being arrested after killing Rokeby. You heard it here first." I am so in.
It's really fun. It's a fun idea. And I love the fact that Absent-Minded Raven says at the end of this comment that he hasn't even read the Strike books. This is all based off of our podcasting.
Which, we've clearly done something very, very right. If this is his takeaway.
Yes. I mean, that would be a really, really epic twist. I think that would be the most epic of Rowling's twists. So...
Agreed.
I was curious. I was like, when I heard this, I was like, is it possible? Do I think it happened? No. But is it possible? And it is technically possible. I think, and my understanding is that Charlotte kills herself or is murdered or dies or whatever the same night as she sends those voicemails to Strike, which is before Strike leaves London to go to Cromwell, because he finds out about her death, or finds out, in quotation marks, if he was the one who did it, when he's outside the city. But she died before he left. He left in the morning. So he could have gone over to her place to confront her about the voicemails, and maybe things got a little out of hand, and then, he decides to make it seem like a suicide. So, perfectly possible. He's also a good suspect in that he has a lot of knowledge of crimes, so he knows how to, do them well, so that he won't be caught. And he knows her very well, so he could easily fake her suicide note. And yeah, totally could be possible.
I love it so much. Well, first of all, as you've been talking about, Strike himself teaches us that it's always means before motive.
Yeah.
So, per your analysis, he has the means, and, let's be clear, he has the motive to kill Charlotte. Most people do, but him more than most.
Yeah. And, she would let him into her apartment, it makes total sense. I will say that, the conversation with Charlotte in the church would make less sense. Unless he's, in denial that he did it or something. Or, he says, I didn't want you dead, so maybe it was an accident. But then he also says stuff about how he wants her to have stayed alive for her kids, so... Or, couldn't you have stayed alive for your kids? So, I don't know.
Well, unless he's blaming the victim, where he's you should have known better, you shouldn't have gotten yourself killed.
Yeah, maybe. Look what you made me do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this works so well with, the themes of the series, which is what I love about it, right? Because we've discussed, a lot that, sort of the main through line running in the Strike series is, male violence against women.
Yeah.
That's sort of what Rowling is interested in exploring for obvious reasons, given her past. And, so much of the series has been about that. And, what a perfect, ultimate twist that, Strike, the one that we all thought was one of the good uns, but, all the signs were there, turns out to also be violent towards women. And let's be clear, he has spent many, many, many books allegedly learning the lesson over and over that women are more than brothels and restaurants. Has he learned the lesson? Most people will say surely this time, but, we also said that 1 or 2 books ago.
Yeah, so, I don't know. We'll see. He did know that suicide note suspiciously well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he and Amelia were in cahoots. Maybe Amelia suspected that Strike had done it. Was this is not Charlotte's handwriting. And was you know what? I'd rather if everyone just thought it was a suicide. And so she burns the note. And that's why she told him. She's just so you know, your secret's safe with me.
Yeah. Well, and what a perfect ring, right? If we're talking about ring theory, it starts with, a fake, Strike investigating and uncovering a fake suicide, and the 7th book ends with him committing one.
True. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. I think it also makes a lot of sense because Robin is our audience surrogate. Sort of from the word go, we are in her eyes, we're in her mind, we're sort of, learning and exploring about this world through Robin. So having Robin as the actual protagonist of the series, I think makes perfect sense. Because she's the one who's really been growing over the last 7 books. We've seen her evolve, we've seen her come into her own, figure her life out, in a way that we really haven't seen for Strike. I think, again, the mark of a good twist is that in retrospect, everything makes sense. And I feel if we got this twist, we'd be yes, obviously, this was Robin's book, where we got to see her finally grow and evolve to the point where she could take down the ultimate villain, the man who mentored her, Cormoran Strike.
Yeah, so it could be that the final book, okay, now I'm imagining it. The final book is, her being like, wow, wouldn't it be such a nice thing to do for Strike to try to figure out who killed his mom? Like, that would be the ultimate show of love. And in doing so, she figures out that it was him all along, and she brings him to justice, and then just runs her own detective agency.
Also, she's absolutely bringing him to justice on, like, the eve of their wedding.
Oh my god, that would be so dramatic. Yes.
Right? That's gonna be the ticking time bomb. She's like, alright, well, tomorrow I walk down the aisle, but then tonight I find out that he's a murderer.
Yes.
It's very Ginny and Georgia. I just finished binging that on Netflix.
I feel like, yeah, that would be an interesting, like, connection to her Matthew wedding, where she's like, I don't know if I want to go through with this kind of thing, but she does, and in this case, she, she is the one who crashes the wedding, and with the police, and, yeah.
Yeah, she walks down the aisle escorted by cops.
Yes! In the green dress, but the green dress is like, I'm imagining it just like shorter and more like punk. Like, she's just suddenly like,
yes. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like this would make sense in a way that, like, the reverse, like, Strike as protagonist and Robin as the villain wouldn't. Like, I feel like we've invested too much in Robin and we like her too much for her to be a villain.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think Rowling has said in some interview somewhere that Robin is the most purely lovable character she's written.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, like, Strike as the villain would be one of the great literary twists.
Yeah.
Like, we're still talking about Snape, but, like, that would put Snape in the dust.
Yeah. I think it would have to have been a much different book series to have quite pulled that off. Like, I just don't feel like at this point it would be a little bit like, wait, what? But it's still, could be fun.
Well, and I disagree with you, because I think Strike was so unlikable in the last book that I think, like, this could very logically be the foundations for him being the murderer.
I don't agree, but in a, like, alternative universe, like, I would love to see the fan fiction of this. Like, I don't see this as, like, something that quite makes sense I don't think it makes sense with the series as it is right now. But if someone wrote the fan fiction, I would be all for it.
Oh, it would be so great. Like, honestly, this is my new hope for the series. Like, I would so love for this to be right.
Yeah, I doubt that you'd be able to convince much people that this is actually what's going to happen. Just like not many of our listeners were convinced of Charlotte's murder, but maybe
that's because they didn't realize Strike was the murderer. That's because we left out the best suspect in our analysis. Like, that was clearly our failing. We should have talked way more about Strike murdering her.
Alright, so after people listen to this, if you've changed your votes, go back into the comments and let us know.
Yes, exactly. And please congratulate Absent-Minded Raven for cracking the code on the Strike series.
Yes.
If
without
he is
reading
right,
any of them.
especially without reading any of them, if he is right, that is going to be the internet's ultimate bragging rights forever.
Yes.
So, Absent-Minded Raven, a toast to you if you got this one right.
Yes.
And listeners, yes, do tell us if you think it was Strike all along. Dun, dun, dun! So listeners, we just want to pause for a minute to welcome another guest to our pub. Welcome to Nick Jeffrey.
Thank you, Irvin. Very glad to be here again.
Yeah, those who listen to our Strike crossover episodes will be familiar with Nick as one of our esteemed Strike panelists and experts.
Yes.
Well, alright, let's get into the episode. I figured we could sort of run down the Potter deaths, order by order, and sort of talk about the arguments for the death, being, real, like, that they're dead as dead, the arguments against, and sort of the place in the fandom. And I'm curious, Sophia, Ev, Louise, were any of you in the Potter fandom early enough to experience all of this?
I came in about the time that Order of the Phoenix was published. I think that was the first, book premiere party I went to, was Order of the Phoenix.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that I was not, I was reading the books, but I was not in the fandom as in on the internet, because I was a child and I didn't do that. But the first fandom-related death conversation that I was aware of was before Deathly Hallows. I read MuggleNet's, I thought, fantastic book, What Will Happen in Harry Potter 7.
Yes.
Which...
Oh, that's a great book.
Blew my mind. I've read it multiple times since the book came out, and every time I'm like, wow, this was some amazing predictions. And yes, in that book they discuss some of the conversations about, is Dumbledore dead? Is he alive? That sort of thing. So that was kind of my first exposure to some of that skepticism over Harry Potter deaths.
Yeah. Ev, what about you?
Well, I'm kind of opposite of Sophia in the sense that I was too old rather than too young. So I was quite late to the party.
Just call me Goldilocks, guys.
Yeah, you're just right. Just right. So I wasn't really in the fandom to kind of do this in real time. I could have been, but I wasn't. So I was vaguely aware that people were kind of not sure whether Sirius have really died because of the veil and because of the color of the spell that Bellatrix casts on him. From the movie side of things, that was the only way that I was sort of vaguely aware of it, but I wasn't really, there wasn't really anything else that I was aware of.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess Louise and I are going to have to hold the fort on the history aspects then. So yes, as you alluded to, the first death we're going to talk about is Sirius, because, Cedric died, and we were like, okay, he's dead, and he's a sparkly vampire, and we're moving on. So, when Sirius dies, it's fairly clear cut. The arguments for Sirius being dead, really dead, first was the grieving process. Order of the Phoenix is, I think, perhaps the lengthiest and most emotional and most, in-depth grieving process we ever see from Jo's writing. She really sort of, took the pages, took the time to, show Harry going through all the 5 stages. He bargains, he rages, he's in denial, he has to come to terms with it, he talks with a lot of people about it, and that one really sort of would be cheapened, if Sirius was then, psych, never mind. And the arguments against Sirius being really, really dead was, from a meta standpoint, it felt so frustrating because, why go through all the rigmarole of Prisoner of Azkaban? You spend a whole ass book trying to save this guy, and then he's gonna be dead 2 books later. And we were like, oh my god, who would do that? What kind of monster would put us through that?
Well, of course, I think we know the answer to that now that we've seen the entire series, and that, of course, comes through John Granger's ring structure, where, books 3 and books 5 are supposed to be in parallel, so it actually, in retrospect, makes perfect sense that Sirius should enter in book 3 and then exit in book 5. But we didn't know that at the time.
And I think that
exactly.
Emotionally, I totally understand why emotionally, because I definitely felt that when I was reading it, when I was like, wait, Harry worked so hard to save Sirius and now he's dead. But I think emotionally there is something really powerful about that, because it's Harry, it's showing the importance of, there's that moment at the end of Prisoner of Azkaban where Harry is saying, none of it mattered. None of it, we didn't stop Pettigrew from escaping, like, none of it really mattered. And Dumbledore says, like, you saved an innocent man from a terrible fate. It mattered so much. And I think that we see that it's not so much that death is this horrible thing. It's that, you know, this unjust death where it's not even death, actually. It's Dementor's kiss, like, where your soul is taken from you and it's done in this unjust way, that's very different from Sirius willingly fighting against evil and dying in the process. And that, you know, this death is like, you know, we all have to die eventually, and that it's even said in the book that this is sort of how Sirius would have wanted to go, is in battle. So that is, that makes all the difference, is how someone dies.
Yes, and
go ahead, Nick.
It emotionally it raises a lot of interesting questions. I don't know, certainly within the book itself, how much that is addressed. But yes, there's the emotionality of the loss. There's the fact that actually Sirius wasn't handling life particularly well at that point either. So he was struggling. He was struggling emotionally. And you're right. If he could have chosen a way to go, that would have been it.
Yeah. Well, Sophia, to your point about how someone is killed, that was sort of the other big argument against Sirius really being dead, is the manner in which he died. Namely the fact that he fell through the veil rather than being outright killed. And, like, you know, we know how people die in these books. We see them, there's a curse for that. So, like, the question was, why bother with him falling through the veil after being hit with a non-lethal spell, if he was meant to be, like, truly and incontrovertibly dead? And the movie actually, you know, saw that and was like, okay, no, we're gonna make him dead. And change the spell to Avada Kedavra. But in the books, it's a non-lethal spell he's hit with.
I think we don't actually know. It just says her next spell hit him in the chest. True,
but, like, the text is always very, very clear and specific when it's a killing curse.
No,
so I think
I agree. Like, I think that's the best guess, is that it's a non-lethal spell. But just to be clear to the readers, to the listeners, it is not stated what the spell is.
No, I mean, essentially, he was killed by a metaphor, I think, in the end. Which is a horrible way to go. So passing the veil, of course, is a metaphor for death within the Christian idiom. A little like the ancient Greeks had crossing the river Styx. Now, within Greek mythology, Greek heroes were crossing the river Styx and recrossing the river Styx like it was a day out at the seaside. I mean, experiencing that metaphor was never essentially the end. I mean, Hercules enjoyed it so much he dognapped Cerberus to take him for a walk, which is a lovely thing to do, and then he enjoyed it so much he came back to rescue Alcestis. So
yeah.
But
do you think Karen has punch cards? Because he really should.
Well, yeah.
He should have brought Fluffy with him.
Yes. But
maybe Sirius should have got Fluffy, and that would have been okay.
So it is a little strange. It is a little strange that that's the manner of death, and it does really suggest that, you know, if you can cross the veil one way, why can't you cross it the other way? Yeah, like the river Styx. Now, Joe hasn't yet completed Cursed Child Part 3, but maybe there's an idea there.
Well, you know, I never remember having much doubt as to whether or not Sirius was dead. I seem to, best I can remember, I took his death at face value right from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, to me, it's clear that, you know, this is called the, like, death chamber or whatever, and that is what they're studying here in the Department of Mysteries, is death, and they're clearly studying it, in this part of the Department of Mysteries, and they're clearly studying it with this veil. So to me, it makes perfect sense that passing through the veil would kill you, and we even see that sort of foreshadowed by how Harry is so attracted to this veil, but Hermione is terrified, and that there is a real reason to be afraid of Harry getting too close to it, is that if he did decide to pass through, that would be the end. And it's interesting you say, like, what a terrible way to go, the metaphor, because I think this is better in a way than if he had been killed with, like, Avada Kedavra. Like, this to me feels more like a very gentle passing, and he's going to meet the people who are on the other side of the veil. Like, I kind of like it better.
Yes.
But Avada Kedavra is supposed to be gentle, except when Snape does
But it's
it.
violent. Right? It's like, it's violent, and this is more like he is entering gently through... I don't know. To me, I like it better.
To be fair, we don't really know how it feels to go through the veil.
Quicker and easier than falling asleep, apparently.
Well,
Touché.
I don't know if I could believe that.
But what about the people that are left behind? I mean, because there was no burial, no wand raising ceremony. It's a funeral without a body.
Well, you had his conversation with Luna. I think that was it, about hearing the voices beyond and her telling him, it's not like we'll never see them again. So I think that was the kind of the substitute for the ritual and the ceremony of the funeral.
But I am actually curious about, like, what did happen to his body?
Well, so I think the thing is, the veil, and is he really dead falling through the veil, is a much stronger argument after the series has concluded, because it never comes back.
Right.
Like, when Order of the Phoenix came out, the fandom largely assumed that the veil would be crucial at the end of the series, because it's a gateway to death. Like, if we're talking about souls and immortality and all that, that really seems like a thing that's going to factor into the plot. And so everyone was like, no, like, the veil, like, kills people, removes souls, etc., and sending Sirius through it was a way to introduce us to that. And so I feel like everyone was much more in on, like, yes, like, the veil kills people, and we're going to see it in play. Once the series was over, and we were like, oh, it just never comes up again. Never mind, I guess. Which, I'm still perplexed by to this day.
I thought it would come back, because I distinctly remember reading it, and the way the room is described as well, that with this kind of like amphitheater seating, I think, it kind of looked ancient, and, well, at least that's how I imagined it in my head when I was reading it for the first time. And I distinctly remember thinking, this got to come back later, because this to me looks like, well, we know the UK wizards don't have the death penalty, but that very much looked like the back in the ancient times when they did have some kind of a death penalty, like, ritual. This is where it would have been. And the Ministry of Magic, then the modern version of it, just kind of grew up around that kind of a sacred place, in a sense, where that veil exists. So they didn't build a veil there. The veil was already there. Do you know what I mean? And then, it never came back, which was disappointing.
It's an elaborate thing to create just to kill someone.
I don't think it's just to kill someone. I think it's to introduce more more of a conversation and more of Harry thinking about, like, I think the whole series is really about death, and this is just one place that Harry is thinking about, like, souls and what is beyond, and, like, to me it's not, like, the purpose of this is not for Sirius to die. It's more of a thematic, exploring a theme that is present in the other books as well.
And it has drawn a lot of conversation. I mean, the fact that, Hermione, am I remembering right? Hermione can't hear any voices on the other side.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that leads a lot of conversations about belief and expectation and how that leads into death.
Oh, I think it's an absolutely beautiful set piece. Like the scene where they're all there, like I love it like in isolation. I just think it's a perplexing thing to spend so much time on and never bring up again, to be honest.
Because so much could have been done with it. Like, what if it's also, wizards, like the version of dignity in dying for wizards?
Well, I really thought that, like, you could, like, chuck a Horcrux through, and, like, that's how you destroy it. Because as of the end of Half-Blood Prince, we didn't know how to destroy Horcruxes. And so I was like, I mean, yeah, like, you toss one bit of soul over, another bit of soul over, and then they're no longer tethering Voldemort to this world. They're kind of gonna tether him to the next one.
Yeah. I was convinced that the final, like, battle between Harry and Voldemort would have been in the Department of Mysteries, because, not even because of that room, but because of the, like, love room, the one that they can't get into, and that, like, Dumbledore says, like, this is, it contains a force that is, like, more dangerous than any other, like, in the Department of Mysteries, and I thought that Harry was gonna kick Voldemort into the love room and lock him up.
Yeah. I think I always knew that the final battle would be at Hogwarts. It's just like, these books are about Hogwarts. It has to be Hogwarts. But I was like, we're gonna have 3 big battles. Like, we gotta do Godric's Hollow, we gotta do the Veil and the Department of Mysteries, and then the final one's at Hogwarts. I think that was what I had pegged. But the other biggest argument for Sirius actually being dead was actually a meta argument. So ahead of the release of Order of the Phoenix, Joe said that there would be a significant character death in the book. Like, it was very well established, like, everyone knew it going in. I remember reading it and I was like, who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? And then when Arthur got attacked, I was like, aw shit, it's gonna be Arthur. So just like, when Sirius died and we were like, well, we knew there's gonna be a big significant death in the book, so it was Sirius, and so he's dead.
Yeah. I'm curious.
And
yeah, sorry, go on.
And just for historical context, there's a chat that Joe did about 9 months after Order of the Phoenix for World Book Day in March 2004. And by that point, it was kind of like a done deal. Everyone was like, oh, it's 100% going to be that. Because there was someone who asked, like, why did you kill Sirius? It made me very sad. And she replied, I'm really, really sorry. I didn't want to do it, but there's a reason. If you think you can forgive me, keep reading, you'll find out. So sort of, yeah, there wasn't the, like, isn't he dead? Everyone was like, oh, he did.
Yeah. Irvin, how much was his body not being found part of the argument for him being alive? But because I still find it weird that his body disappeared, because I can understand that his soul went through the veil, but, like, where did his body go? Like, what on the other side of the veil, like, where does your body go? Like, I don't get it.
Into non-being, which is to say everything.
Yeah. But was that a big part of it? The lack of body?
Part of it is the lack of body. Part of it is just, like, we know how to kill people in Rowling's universe, and this wasn't it.
Yeah.
Moving on from Sirius Black, let's talk about Dumbledore, and whether or not he is, in fact, dead as a Dumbledoornail.
I like that.
I thank you.
I have to say, when I was reading it, it didn't occur to me that he would be not dead.
Same here.
I thought it was pretty clear-cut from where I was reading for the first time.
So did I, in fact.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I think, sort of, unlike any of the other deaths, like Sirius, where it's like the meta consideration of, like, how could he be dead after all we went through? With Dumbledore, like, if you've read any fantasy at all ever, like, he's gonna die.
He had to go, yeah.
He had to go,
I was young enough that I didn't know that. I was shocked.
Which honestly is great. One of my favorite authors, Sarah Beth Durst, is fond of saying, like, about writing in tropes and cliches, being like, well, the thing about, like, using tropes and cliches in books for young readers is that it's going to be some reader's first time encountering it.
It's true. Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah. But so while we didn't all, while none of us believed that Dumbledore is dead, laying out the case for why he is dead, you can actually make a very convincing case. There's a lot of evidence to marshal for
You mean
it.
isn't? Sorry.
Yeah, right, yeah, sorry. The case for why he isn't dead, there is a solid case to be made. There is evidence, there's quotes, there's symbols, it's not just the, I wish he weren't dead. Fans really did make very thorough cases for it. Again, the arguments, for Dumbledore not being dead are best marshaled at dumbledoreisnotdead.com, but, that is by no means the only source for these. So I thought I could run down sort of a highlight of sort of the main evidence for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So honestly, I think the single biggest thing for arguing why Dumbledore isn't really dead, is his association with phoenixes, right? His whole symbol, his whole motif is an animal that doesn't die but returns from the dead. It's his Patronus, it's his pet, it's sort of, Harry keeps associating Dumbledore with phoenixes and Phoenix Song.
So somewhere there is a nest where a baby Dumbledore emerges from the ashes. Is that what you're saying?
That is absolutely what I'm saying.
Okay,
Now I'm just
fair enough.
imagining a Dumbledore looking exactly like he does in adulthood and just shrunken, just a small Dumbledore with a full-length beard and hair and glasses and broken nose.
with the wet beard, the little bird comes out with the wet feathers. His whole beard is soaking wet, and he's
gross.
Yeah, that would.
So are we talking like a homunculus kind of situation, and then he just grows in size, but he is still fully proportioned as a man?
Yeah, that's how I'm imagining it. Yeah.
Okay, so this is
sort
worse.
That's sort of what Voldemort wasn't dead, but when he went from that little fetus thing to the full-grown wizard, that's sort of what happened there.
That's true.
Yeah. And, specifically on the Phoenixes thing, there's a line during Dumbledore's funeral that sort of all the theorists latched onto. So when flames erupt around Dumbledore's body, Harry thought he saw a phoenix fly joyfully into the blue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the line, that, launched 1,000 theories. Because, phoenixes, up in flames, and then you fly out of it unscathed.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Sophia.
I mean, to me, that's sort of ignoring some of the broader symbolism going on. We are told in the very first book that, to the well-organized, that Dumbledore says, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. So to me, it's yes, he's being sort of reborn, as in he is that is his soul going on to the next, the next great adventure. So I think, that's sort of ignoring what we know about Dumbledore, but I can see why people went there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was also, of course, the Phoenix Lament song. Fawkes, flew around weeping and mourning Dumbledore's death. And, I think Fawkes was probably being very truthful then. And then, of course, he flies away, and Harry realizes that Fawkes has left Hogwarts forever, just like Dumbledore had. So that is really what kind of convinced me, nope, he besides, the body and the funeral pyre and everything like that, he's dead.
So, on the topic of the Phoenix Lament, there was a theory for that as well, and this is in the, grasping at straws section of the argument. But I believe the rebuttal to that is that the lament wasn't a lament, but it was actually magic. That Phoenix Song has powerful, healing magical properties. And so the theory went that Fawkes's lament wasn't, wasn't just a lament, but it was actually his magic phoenix powers helping to revive Dumbledore.
But then, a bit like what Sophia is saying, it would be so against the whole kind of broader context of the book where, you know, you have to deal with death. Death is one thing that we all have to deal with. And having a magical phoenix song that just brings people back from the dead would just go against everything, and against, you know, later on when we talk about the resurrection stone and how the resurrected people aren't real live people. It's just, as much as I didn't want Dumbledore to die, the alternative of that just doesn't work for me.
Sure. So part of it is you have to, like, cast your mind to, like, a pre-Deathly Hallows time where, like, we didn't know how it was all gonna end, you know, we didn't know about the Resurrection Stone, and, you know, like, especially, you know, per ring theory, you know, at the end of book 2, Fawkes's healing song brings Harry back when he's, you know, an inch from death.
Well, his tears do, but yes.
Right, yeah, sorry, his tears. So, like, the idea that, like, Phoenix magic could, like, bring Dumbledore back from the brink of death, especially when Dumbledore is so associated with Phoenixes, like, you know, it's a convincing case. Like, even if none of us were convinced.
But he was already dead.
Yeah,
I mean, he wasn't at the brink of death.
He didn't have that inch, I don't think. He was not an inch from death. He was at death. And
which, again, we know now.
Yeah.
I mean, if we could get Fawkes to, you know, before Dumbledore falls from the tower, although arguably he's already dead at that point, maybe, you know, kind of like an extreme bird emergency services.
I don't know. I mean,
while that inch is still there, but I don't think so.
If the fake Moody was telling the truth, there is no antidote for Avada Kedavra. So I don't think, even if you were soaked in Phoenix tears at the moment it hit you,
he was already dead. Yeah.
Otherwise, you get Phoenix tears and, you know, apply a little poultice to your forehead and wear that whenever you go into battle, because then you can't be killed, because the Phoenix tears would keep you immortal. And I don't think that's what they do.
Okay, so you are correct that if it was a properly applied Avada Kedavra, there's no bringing him back. But was it? So there was a lot of theory going around that the Avada Kedavra that we saw and heard was not actually an Avada Kedavra. Which there are two main points to that. First is that, again, per Fake Moody, you really have to mean an Avada Kedavra. It's got to be powerful magic behind it. And so the people who thought that Snape was a good guy argued that Snape didn't mean the Avada Kedavra, and so it wouldn't have worked to actually kill Dumbledore. And the other argument is that throughout Half-Blood Prince, especially early on in the book, a lot of emphasis is placed on nonverbal spells. And usually sort of whatever they're learning in class will often be plot relevant later on. So the theory went that, you know, Snape may have said Avada Kedavra, but he was actually casting a different nonverbal spell that just had a lot of green light. And so that Dumbledore was not actually killed by an Avada Kedavra, and he just fell from the tower, in which case Phoenix Song would totally work.
You know, I hadn't heard that specific, I don't think I'd heard that specific part of the argument, but the argument in general that, like, the Avada Kedavra was not, like, that the way that Avada Kedavra worked in some way was not actually the way an Avada Kedavra is supposed to work. I actually found that the most compelling argument at the time, because, like, I mentioned earlier that I had read the book, What Will Happen in Harry Potter 7, and one of the things they talk about is that, like, the way Dumbledore's body or Dumbledore reacts to the Avada Kedavra is, like, not how it's supposed to work. Like, you're supposed to just crumble. You're not supposed to, like, fly into the air. So I found that kind of compelling. I was like, well, you know, he does, just, like, he flies into the air, and, like, that could have been a whole, like, it could have been a plan that he, like, flies out of sight, so everyone assumes that he's dead, but, like, during the fall, he's, like, doing something where he, like, is able to magically save himself, and he creates a fake body or something like that, you know. So I thought that was
like
actually
a theatrical death.
Yeah, exactly. That this was something they planned together so that everyone would think he was dead. I was like, I wasn't fully convinced, but I was like, I think I could get behind that.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly, I think that the line about the phoenix flying out of the flame, like, while it's beautiful and poignant, I do think that it was misleading, because it does sort of make you think that there is hope, there is something there. I do think if it weren't for that line about the phoenix flying out of the flame, sort of this theory wouldn't have nearly as much traction as it did.
That's interesting, because I don't find that line very compelling. I mean, I find it compelling in its own way, but I think that the hope is that there is something after death. You know, that he is going on to the afterlife or whatever. But I could see how people interpret it differently. But for me, it was always like the fact that the spell doesn't seem to work the same way it does for every other Avada Kedavra we've seen in the series, that I was like, maybe it's not like a full Avada Kedavra. Yeah.
I feel like this is sort of the great commonality between the deaths we didn't believe. Is like, if it's not, like, a by-the-book Avada Kedavra, we're skeptical. So, like,
right.
Sirius, it wasn't an Avada Kedavra, it was just a spell and he went through the veil, and we're like, but then is he dead? And with Dumbledore, it's like, well, it's an Avada Kedavra, but is it really? So is he dead? So, yeah, like, that's why no one ever argued for Cedric, because he is killed very by the book.
Yes. So, what I'm curious is, like, I have my own thoughts on this, but why do you guys think, because we do know now that he did die, that Avada Kedavra didn't act like a normal one?
So actually, this was my big thought for the week, that you can find on social media.
Exciting. Yeah. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, but basically, Snape's spells tend to have some oomph to them. Like, a lot of the times we see Snape's spells sort of, have violent results not in line with the spell itself. Because, other people cast Avada Kedavra and it's like a quick, painless death. There's a rushing sound. Snape casts Avada Kedavra and, he's blasted from the tower. And it reminded me a lot of the Dueling Club with Lockhart, where, Expelliarmus is supposed to be, like your wand flies out of your hand. But when Snape casts Expelliarmus at Lockhart is blasted backwards.
But that's not the only time that we see, that's not the only time we see Expelliarmus blast you backwards, because when, if I'm remembering right, I might be wrong. Give me a moment. When the three of them cast Expelliarmus at Snape in the Shrieking Shack, doesn't he fly backwards?
He does, but that's like three of them casting it at once.
But that's like three 13-year-olds.
You got over-enthusiastic.
Yeah, but like 3 13-year-olds compared to one Snape is probably like about the same. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. Snape is very strong, magically.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like related to emotion,
I think so.
Yeah, Snape has that temper, he, flies off the handle, like he did at the end of Prisoner of Azkaban when he escapes. He's like, I know he did it. He it's like, he's been here the whole time. No, he did it. He helped him escape. And, when he finds Harry trespassing in the Pensieve, he has those very, very strong outbursts of temper.
Yeah.
And so I think it's consistent when, one, he really hates somebody, and of course he really hates Lockhart. And number two, or he really hates what he is doing. And there, I think, is where the Avada Kedavra, they have that loathing expression on his face. And of course, we find out later it wasn't Dumbledore he was loathing at that point. He was loathing what he had to do because he didn't want to do it. He had told Dumbledore, I don't want to do this. I'm going to back out. And Dumbledore told him, no, you're not. So I think Snape, even Snape's regret comes out in anger, which I think is why, his grief over Lily's death wound up as 7 years of torturing Harry. And Neville, and and everybody else that he was cruel to. And of course, he's just a nasty guy in general. So it may be that your spells have a little more blasting power if you're just a bad-tempered dude in general.
So I think, just to push back slightly, I think his loathing was for what he was doing and who he was casting at. Like, I think in that moment, he is full of loathing for Dumbledore. He's full of loathing for this man who is asking him to do this. For the man who is, condemning him to be a pariah, who's asking him to commit murder. Like, I don't think he's full of warm and fuzzy feelings towards Dumbledore in that moment. I think that loathing is honestly come by.
Yeah,
I don't.
but he's still loyal to Dumbledore, and that's.
I mean, you can be loyal to people you hate.
Can you loathe someone and be loyal to them at the same time?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm not.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's harder. I think it's certainly easier to stay loyal to somebody if you like them, but yeah.
I think personally, I don't want to get too much on this sidetrack, but like, I think that Dumbledore might have been Snape's best friend, and I think that he cared a lot about Dumbledore. So I think in that moment, yes, there might have been like hatred towards him for making him do this. But I think that underneath that, I think there's love, or at least respect or whatever.
Very, very, very deeply.
I don't even know if it's that
deeply.
deeply. I don't even know if it's that deeply. But anyway, personally, I sort of read it differently of why the Avada Kedavra is different, because I think it's maybe about like intention, like, mainly, okay, so Snape says to Dumbledore, like, what about my soul? Like, what about my soul? Like, if I kill you. And Dumbledore says, you alone know if helping an old man, like, have the death he chooses, I don't remember the exact words, will hurt your soul. And I think that, this is the only time maybe that we've seen a killing curse that was not like the soul-ripping kind of killing curse, that it's like he is doing something kind almost with a killing curse. So like that this is maybe a different type of, just a different version of the killing curse than we've seen before. And I think, like there's something very poetic about Dumbledore like flying into the air and like being like temporarily suspended in air and then like a kind of graceful fall that like to me is almost more respectful than him just crumbling. Like it feels more like the sort of dramatic end that he deserves almost.
That he would want. Let's be honest. Dumbledore would want to go out in style.
Exactly. So
He
like
would,
to me
yes.
it's more like I would have found it so much worse if he just like crumbled, like, just like life is gone. Whereas this is like there's something beautiful about it almost. And I feel like that is like maybe reflecting the fact that this is the way he wants to go out. Like this is his choice, and therefore it's not like just life being taken from him.
Well, Sophia, I think that's very insightful. And I know on the last show, there was a mention of things we hope are different in the TV show. And my number one thing on that list is that Voldemort's death is Voldemort falling over and is just dead rather than, being blasted apart. Because again, that's the last thing he wanted. That's the least dignified. He doesn't want his dead body just lying there like any other man's. Yes. And, I get what you're saying. Had Dumbledore's done that the same way, there is definitely, although smashing him on the ground and having all his limbs broken is not necessarily that dignified either.
That's true, but like the dramatic fall, like I don't know, there's just something kind of like it's a way to go. It's a statement. Like I don't know.
It's a statement. Oh my god.
So like I love where you're coming from, because like I will always be down with the theory that Dumbledore is a drama queen. But just I don't know that I agree with it, just because it's described like, so violently. Like, again, he's blasted back. Like, I feel like that doesn't convey, like, peaceful act of generosity. Like, I think it really is more about, like, Snape just having too many feelings. Just because I think Snape is an extraordinarily powerful wizard, and he doesn't often have outlets for that. Especially as a potions master, like, it's a lot more like, simmering cauldron and, like, controlled, measured magic. So I think, like, when he finally sort of, like, lets loose his emotions, lets loose his magic, there's just, like, a lot of punch to it.
Let's just say he's not great at the whole emotional regulation side of things. This is not his forte.
And the funniest thing is, like, when he does occlumency with Harry, he's like, control your emotions! That's, like, the funniest
well, you control
line.
Your emotions.
Like, all caps, control your emotions!
Yeah, be like, hey, buddy, pot, meet kettle.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to mention before we go too far away from this, with regards to can spells look different for different people? I don't think it's particularly explicit in Harry Potter, but it's very explicit in Rivers of London. I don't know if you guys read that fantasy series, but what they have there is that every person who is a practitioner of magic have their own kind of a signature. So they all do the same spells, but you can sort of tell who did that particular spell because there is kind of a variation between people. And I think there's something similar in Harry Potter. It's just not really talked about that much, but I think it's kind of alluded to when Dumbledore and Harry are in the cave, and Dumbledore is sort of like, I can recognize Tom's work. So I think there is like a feel, with like different spells, different magic from different people would have a different feel. And I think this is what Snape's spells are like.
Yeah. I kind of like that. That, like, just, Snape's style is everyone gets blasted.
Mm-hmm. He just puts too much force into anything. And you kind of meet people like that who are physically a little bit more forceful than they need to be. They always slam doors when they can close them. When they put something down, they just sort of smack it on the table.
Yeah. I encounter that a lot in my dance classes, with my dancing Death Eaters, where we've definitely had dancers who just, like, everything is so big, and I was like, no, like, this is going to be, like, a tight, neat little spin, like, you're not leaping across the stage on this one.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense to me. But back to whether or not Dumbledore is really dead. So one of the other, like, lines that was often marshaled in argument that he's not dead, which, again, is from the end of Chamber of Secrets, because, the ring theory of it all, the parallel between Book 2 and 6, is in Chamber of Secrets, Dumbledore says that he will only truly have left the school when none here are loyal to me. Which Harry actually trots out, at the end of Half-Blood Prince in rebuttal to Scrimgeour. And yes, we know that this is speaking metaphorically, that he's there in spirit and so on. But again, like, you could make an argument for taking it literally, where he genuinely hasn't left the school as long as people there are loyal.
Yeah. Of course, in one sense, he was still there in that he was the only headmaster buried there. So that was part of his, the school's loyalty to him was to allow him to have that nice white tomb on the grounds. And of course, his legacy, his legacy was certainly crucial at the Battle of Hogwarts, by virtue of the mission he set out for Harry and the way he supported him. You could say directly when Harry met him at King's Cross, but you could also say, indirectly with Aberforth having the mirror and, sending Dobby and then deciding to join in the battle and helping the good guys when he had previously given up. I mean, all that was Dumbledore's legacy there, and it's still driving the story.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if we think about, like, just what was known at the end of Half-Blood Prince, though, I can see why people would argue that, but I also think that moment when Harry does say that line to Scrimgeour, and Scrimgeour's like, Dumbledore is dead, right? And he's like, yeah, no, I know that. Like, you wouldn't understand. And to me, I read that line as, like, that Scrimgeour is taking this so literally, and Harry is the one who understands that it was not meant literally. So I still think that, from what we know in Half-Blood Prince, I still wouldn't really buy that theory, but I can understand why people went there.
But also, Harry's wrong about everything all the time.
But this is like an emotional thing. Like, this is not like to me, it's like part of the spiritual center of the book,
Yes.
Did anybody want Dumbledore to come back as a ghost?
No.
I think, based on the conversation Harry has with Nick at the end of Order of the Phoenix, where only people who are afraid of death would come back, I think it wouldn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
Just based on Dumbledore being like, death is but the next great adventure, like, he is sort of the last person I would consider coming back as a ghost.
Yeah,
like,
agreed.
If he's dead, he's dead. I think sort of the whole fandom was very thoroughly settled on that. But the next argument in favor of Dumbledore not being dead, and this is actually a very interesting one, is that in certain editions of the book, Dumbledore explicitly says that the Order of the Phoenix can fake deaths. So, this is actually a fascinating bit of Potter history.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. Okay, go for it.
Yeah. So, in the US hardcover of Half-Blood Prince, there are 3 extra lines in the Lightning Struck Tower chapter that were meant to be edited out of the book, but there was a faux pas in the printing of the US hardcover, and they were left in. And, like, the hubbub over this, y'all can't imagine. 'Cause, like, the Lightning Struck Tower, fans were, like, analyzing this line by line and word by word, and then suddenly the American fans are like, well, when Dumbledore says this, and the British fans and the Canadian fans and everyone's like, what you talking about? Like, he doesn't say that. And then it turned out that there was a difference between the versions, and so these lines were stricken in the US paperback printing and in all subsequent editions, but they were present in the most widely read version. And so one of the lines that was supposed to be edited out but wasn't is when Dumbledore is trying to convince Draco to defect. He says, he cannot kill you if you are already dead. Which, like, everyone took to mean that, the Order of the Phoenix can absolutely fake someone's death to hide them. That, apparently the Order is already in the business of doing so. And so everyone found this line and latched onto it, and it's like, well, why would Dumbledore say that the Order of the Phoenix is in the business of faking people's deaths right before Dumbledore, quote-unquote, dies?
It's so interesting because, like, only, like, this year because I have the original hardcover book of Half-Blood Prince, so I've always only known those lines to be in the book. And only this year did Irvin tell me that they weren't supposed to be in the book, and I was just like, what? Like, what are you talking about?
That was news to me, too. That is, it may suggest that there was some plan to bring some character we thought was dead back and turned out to be a fake death, and it just got cut from the later story.
Yeah, the other sort of really popular recipient of the, are they dead theory was Emmeline Vance.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That makes sense. It's funny, of course, Draco turns down the offer, and, at the end of the day, I don't think we had anyone actually fake their death other than Peter Pettigrew. Is that correct?
Barty Crouch Jr.
Barty Crouch Jr. Yeah,
Well,
Barty Crouch Jr. Okay, that's right. Thank you. Okay, so the only 2 people who do that who are bad guys, too. So,
yeah, but, like, considering, like, Voldemort's Death Eaters seem to fake death on the regular.
Yeah.
like, you could make the argument, like, well, why not the good guys?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, based on these lines, which, again, I didn't realize they were edited out of the other versions until you said so. One of the predictions I did make for Book 7 as we were building up to it was that someone we thought dead would turn up alive based on this exact quotation. However, I never thought it would be Dumbledore, and I never thought it would be Sirius. I thought it would be someone much more minor. I think I guessed Amelia Bones, who I always wish we had seen more of Amelia Bones because she seemed like an awesome character. Or perhaps Karkaroff, and he would wind up being, a spy somewhere off at Durmstrang or something. I don't know. But I figured it was going to be someone, but not a biggie, not Sirius and not Dumbledore.
Yeah, I never thought it would be Karkaroff, just because he was so clearly like a, D-list villain. But you could make the argument for Regulus Black, too.
Ooh, yeah, that would be cool. Yeah.
That would have been very fun, actually.
That would have been.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think that line is, like, you don't necessarily have to interpret it as, like, they're faking a death, as in, like, creating a fake body to make it seem like the person is dead, but, like, it could also be, we will hide you, you will disappear, and they will just assume we killed you, which is kind of how I had interpreted it more. But that is interesting. Like, I wonder, like, what you do to make what spells you could use to make a fake death. Like, is it you just, like, could you just transfigure anything to make it look like a person, but, like, you'd have to be really good at it. Like, yeah, do you duplicate
But Dumbledore was the transfiguration professor, so
like, I think Dumbledore could do
is.
it. I think Dumbledore could do it, but could the average person? I doubt it, but...
Or you blow everything up and cut off your finger.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's, that it was done that way. What about Draft of the Living Death?
Oh, we were just gonna get to that in a bit. Yeah. But also, I do want to plug a project of mine. So, judging by the fact that none of you knew this theory until I brought it to your attention, apparently this is going to be of interest to quite a few Harry Potter fans, hopefully. But so, I have a book about Dumbledore, and I have an upcoming book about the Malfoys, but I also wrote a little bonus thing connecting the two. So, I wrote a bonus piece that will be either available in a box set of Dumbledore and Malfoy or available as its own ebook online. But basically, it's analysis of the Lightning Struck Tower, because I'm obsessed with that chapter. And so the first part of it is talking about, Dumbledore and Draco and the rhetoric used. But the second part is talking about the differences between the two versions. And I sort of do like a sentence by sentence breakdown of the changes, and sort of, what they mean, the theories around them, why they were edited out, and sort of, it's a very deep dive. So if this, bit of Harry Potter history and trivia is of interest to you, check out my Lightning Struck Tower, bonus ebook, and, hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Cool, thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm literally, like, in edits for it this week, so it's very
do the
top
box
of mind.
set, because I want to get both your books, and if I could get that as a bonus, that'd be great.
Yeah, because then hopefully it'll be like physically printed, and you can like have something tangible to hold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, so do we want to talk about the Draft of Living Death?
Let's do it.
Sure.
Yeah. So as Nick alluded to, this was a very popular theory in ye olden days, that the Draft of Living Death is involved, in perhaps faking a couple deaths here and there. Because, the water in the cave, like the cave that, the locket's in and everything, is described in some odd ways. The ripples vanished unnaturally fast. The water is sinisterly smooth. And so one of the popular theories back in the day is that the water in the cave is actually Draft of Living Death. And so, when Dumbledore has to drink the water after drinking the potion containing the locket, that he actually drank Draft of Living Death, and so, therefore, like, the body we see is just a very powerfully asleep Dumbledore.
Now I wonder how old that Draft of the Living Death got there. Because it's either this like natural formation that just made this powerful potion there, or Tom was batch making the Draft of the Living Death and just emptying it into that cavern.
Just like a massive cauldron that he's like dumping in. Like, oh, how many of these do we have to do?
A lot of Gemino spells.
Well, we know that Voldemort, just like me, has a giant human-sized cauldron to work with.
Yeah, but human-sized and lake-sized are two very different things.
Yeah, I mean...
Okay, but he also has years to do this. Like, I imagine he's just like, he just keeps a batch going at all times. He brews one, he brews another, and he just keeps emptying them into the lake.
I mean, zombies are the living dead, so you could say that it is a cauldron filled with the living dead rather than...
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So if you soak them in the water, naturally over time it'll turn into the Draft of the Living Death. Is that what you're saying, Nick?
I mean, that's a possibility. But Snape actually lists the ingredients, doesn't he, for Draft of the Living Death?
Yeah. Or at least.
Yes, powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood.
No zombies involved.
Apparently not.
I mean, maybe that's a shortcut. Maybe that's like a Half-Blood Prince recipe being like, well, you can either use asphodel and wormwood, or you can just chuck an Inferius into it.
Yeah, so the idea is that this was all part of Voldemort's plan of, like, both the potion that you drink is gonna make you, like, all out of it, and then you need water, you drink the water, you fall asleep, the zombies pull you in. Like, that's kind of the full plan.
Yes, which, like, it actually kind of makes more sense to just have the potential victim, like, very thoroughly asleep there, rather than, like, have the potential victim die, because, if, whoever drinks the potion is then dragged by the Inferi and killed, like, Voldemort can't exactly question them and be like, how did you know? How did you get through my defenses? Like, it's much more useful to Voldemort if whoever is trying to get the locket just ends up, under a sleeping curse for, years or decades until Voldemort can, come by and check it out.
But, like, we kind of know that that's not how it works, because, like, I mean, if that was the case, why not just make the original potion Draft of Living Death rather than the water that he drinks? Like, why don't you just do that? And also, it's pretty clear that the point of drinking the water is so that the Inferi pull you in, because, like, that's what we see with Regulus. Like, we don't see that, like, Voldemort comes back and questions him. So, like, it just seems like Dumbledore was wrong about that. Like, that wasn't what Voldemort wanted.
Well, but that's with the hindsight of Deathly Hallows.
Okay, like, but, like, even without the hindsight of Deathly Hallows, like, if the Draft of Living Death is part of it, like, you'd think that would just be the potion that you would drink to get the locket. Like, why would he take the extra step of, like, you have to drink this potion that makes you go crazy, and then you have to drink this to make you fall asleep? Like, why not just drink the potion to make you fall asleep?
Drama.
Okay, I have it. I have answers to that.
Okay.
The first answer is drama, because Voldemort is a messy drama queen, and he likes the flair.
But he's not going to be there to watch it, like...
Maybe he has secret cameras.
Well, clearly he doesn't.
Sophia,
but
weren't you the one who wrote an article saying that Dumbledore totally has, like, a portal video spell, and he can just, like, pop in and watch whatever he wants around Wizarding Britain? I think Voldemort has that too, and he'd just be like, oh my god, oh, look at him, oh, he's getting dragged in the water. But also, on a less silly note, I think it's a failsafe. So, the way I pictured is the Inferi come after you until you fall asleep. And then the Inferi will leave you alone because they're not interested in, sleeping or seeming dead bodies. So I think it's a failsafe, right? So, like, you drink the Draft of Living Death, and in an ideal scenario, you fall asleep then and there, and, stay snoozing on that island until Voldemort comes by 10 years later. But in case the Draft of Living Death doesn't take, in case you have an antidote, in case you have tolerance built up, for whatever reason, like, the failsafe is that the Inferi will just drag you under and kill you. Because I think what Voldemort doesn't want, most of all, is whoever is there escaping.
Right.
So, ideal scenario, you're asleep. Plan B, you're dead. But either way, you don't end up out of the cave. So I think it still makes sense.
But I also, it's pretty clear that you kind of, as Dumbledore says, you kind of need, a second person there to be able to get yourself through all of the potion, to force yourself to drink all of the potion, because, the whole, what the potion does to you makes you, not drink anymore. And then at the end, Dumbledore could not have gotten himself that water on his own. So, it seems like...
why do you think Dumbledore couldn't have gotten him the water?
Because he's laying there completely unable to move, just going, water, water. He's not getting the water.
But that's because he drank the whole potion. So
right,
and
but
again,
he doesn't ask for the water until the very end. So it's not throughout he's like, water, water, water. It's he's going crazy and is just going crazy. And then it's only at the end that he asks for the water.
So, okay, and we're trying to reverse engineer a supervillain's plan based on it failing, so this is hard. But my rebuttal would be that, you drink some of the potion, and then a few minutes go by, and then you need water. I think that it takes a couple minutes for the potion to work through your system and make you need water. So because Harry keeps Dumbledore drinking, we only see that when he drinks all the potion. But I think if you come as one person, the way it's designed, you drink the potion, you drink 2 gobletfuls, maybe 3, then you're just going crazy and you're lying on that island convulsing, and then 5 minutes later you're like, oh shit, I need water. You crawl to the water's edge, you drink you drink the quote-unquote water of living death, shenanigans ensue. So I think the fact that there was a second person there making you drink the whole potion wasn't by design. I think no one is meant to drink all
I
of the
agree.
potion.
I don't think anyone was meant to drink the whole
Or
potion.
he could have just brought a water bottle with him if he was prepared.
Yeah.
True.
That could have helped.
But also, okay, do you think they infuriate, because, when Harry goes get the water, he, touches the water, and the Inferi are that is my prey, and they grab him and start pulling him in. Do you think they are smart enough to be oh, well, Harry wasn't the one actually drinking the potion, so we want to kill Harry, but we wouldn't have killed Dumbledore, because Dumbledore we want to have the draught of living death and just sleep there. And it seems very clear that they are trying to pull Harry in because he touched the water. So I just don't, it doesn't really make sense to me.
So I think the Inferi would have to pull in, whoever hadn't drunk, either the potion or Draught of the Living Death. I think that, either one would sort of be a trigger for the Inferi to leave.
Do they have
alone.
brains? How do they know?
I don't think it's a brains thing. I think it's a magic thing.
Okay, so they somehow know that Harry didn't drink the potion. And they also knew, because, it was, basically before he even, did anything with the water. In the moment that he's pouring the water on Dumbledore, they're grabbing him. How do they know he wasn't going to drink the water? I don't know. I just think it doesn't make sense.
I think the Inferi sort of will try to drag anyone in who isn't, powerfully asleep. That, they have no interest in, dead people or corpses or very powerfully sleeping entities.
Okay.
But anyone sort of awake and resisting would be their victim.
Okay. Sure. I don't buy it, but sure.
I mean, again, if you're trying to lay out a case, I think you can make one that would make sense. Obviously, it's not the case, so, it's all kind of moot. But I think it was a powerful factor in the theory, the Draught of Living Death, and especially because it's weird that Draught of Living Death is irrelevant to the plot. Because, again, going back to Sorcerer's Stone, when we find out how to make the Draught of Living Death, everything else mentioned comes up later, because Snape mentions 3 things: the Draught of Living Death, the Bezoar, and Wolfsbane. So the Bezoar obviously shows up in Half-Blood Prince. Wolfsbane is an important part of Prisoner of Azkaban with the Wolfsbane potion, but the Draft of Living Death, never relevant to the plot.
I think it's a good world building, though, if not every single thing that you ever mention then is important, because otherwise you kind of fall into this trap that a lot of school students fall into when they're given a task or a problem in an exam and they feel like they have to use every single number, because they wouldn't have been given it if it wasn't important. And I think it would take away from, the atmosphere of the books if every single thing was something else later.
Well, what we need to do is we need to get hold of those outlines like we did for Order of the Phoenix.
Yes!
And do another book.
Oh, I'd sell my soul for that.
See if there's a Draft of Living Death notation in any of the little grid marks that were from the original outline.
Wouldn't that be a treasure trove? All those dusty boxes in the attic. We know her friend Ian Rankin actually gifted his archives, all his notes, to Edinburgh University, and that for Rowling to do something like that would be an absolute goldmine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course,
do you think she will?
We can plug the Phoenix or the Flame book. We had the notes, or we had some of the notes, a few of the outlines for Order of the Phoenix, and wrote a whole book of essays on that Irvin and I contributed to. I think that would be. I think it'd be very. If I had to choose one other book to get those notes from, it absolutely would be Deathly Hallows.
Oh, Half-Blood Prince for me, not even a question.
Why not both?
I mean, true.
We want the whole archive, don't we?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Fluff them up, Joe. Come on.
Yeah. Nick, do you think she'll donate her notes, like, maybe, in her will or something to an archive?
I have fond hopes that she will, but I honestly don't believe it'll be in her lifetime.
Yeah, that's fair. But Ev, to your point about the world building, I hear what you're saying, but it's not just world building, it's storytelling. And sort of the mark of a good storyteller, especially a good mystery writer, which these are mysteries dressed in fantasy, is that, things you mention should somehow matter. They should reveal something about character or something about story, or not just be cool, fun, details. So I think the fact that Draft of Living Death is the only thing that isn't plot relevant is weird, and, does suggest that maybe there was a plan for it.
Although I would say that it does reveal something about the characters, and it reveals about Snape that he is expecting, this is very advanced magic, and that he is, bullying this 11-year-old for not knowing how this works.
Sure, but Joe is also a master of doing 4 things at once.
Sure.
So yeah,
but I think there could be a good argument that she meant it to be relevant, but book 1 was a long way away from book 6, and she eventually was like, doesn't make sense anymore.
No, but it's also relevant for book 6, because in the first potions lesson of Half-Blood Prince, once again, there are a whole bunch of potions, and literally all the others are plot relevant. In that first lesson with Slughorn, we have Polyjuice, which is a staple of the plot, in books 2, 4, 6, and 7. We have Felix Felicis, which is crucial in Half-Blood Prince. We have Amortentia, which, again, crucial in Half-Blood Prince, between Romilda Vane and Merope Gaunt. We have Veritaserum, which was a big part of the plot in Goblet of Fire. And then we just have Draft of Living Death, which is also there. Do you think
it could be, sort of reminding us of that original, Snape, of the fact that Snape originally told us about this, and that then it's sort of reminding us of that passage, so then when the Bezoar comes up, you're like, oh, both of these things, that Snape was like teaching Harry about this, and then maybe sort of planting in your mind this sort of Half-Blood Prince Snape connection. Like, I don't know, like, I feel like with the Bezoar, it's like such a clever thing where it's like, well, like, you know, the Half-Blood Prince has taught me so much more than Snape ever did, you know, and then realizing that Snape already taught him about this stuff in their first lesson.
Doesn't Harry make it in Half-Blood Prince for
Yes.
Slughorn? And
Yeah,
so it comes
it's
back
the
in that way.
assignment. Yes.
It's not like super plot relevant, but it still comes back again, and I could imagine it being a
Yeah.
sort of reminder of that original potions thing, and like, oh wow, like, you know, unlike with Snape, who never taught Harry anything, like, Harry is so good at making the draught of living death, you know, because of the Half-Blood Prince, and then it turns out that, like, Snape did teach him about this originally, and Snape is the Half-Blood Prince.
Well, he mentioned that he didn't really teach him anything. It was, in some ways, he was showing off in front of an 11-year-old child.
Sure. I'm not saying that it was, like, a good teaching moment on Snape's part. I'm just saying that he did say, like, how you make the draught of living death. And I feel like, you know, it's a terrible teaching moment on Snape's part. Snape was a terrible teacher to Harry. And yet, there's this funny comparison of, like, Harry learns the most potions from the Half-Blood Prince, who is Snape. But
Yeah,
you're
so
comparing
I think,
that
didn't
to,
we-
like, that first lesson.
Didn't we just talk ourselves into saying that it does come up again in a minorly relevant way? So
Yeah, that's what I was trying to argue, yeah.
yeah. So
I mean,
don't
you
know,
could
Irvin.
you could argue that it was intended to be a red herring. Now I missed it, but if it was just the one mention in Philosophers, then yes, it's maybe something that was picked up and dropped. But because you got that second mention, was it intended to be a red herring? Were we intended to think at that point, is Dumbledore really dead?
I think we definitely were intended to think that Dumbledore was dead. I think Joe definitely meant him to be sort of, you know, incontrovertibly dead. You know, I think the Draft of Living Death may have been a red herring for someone else, not being quite as dead as they seem. Like, you know, Ev, Sophia, to your point that it is relevant, like, the Draft of Living Death proves relevant as a callback to the lesson, but, like, the potion itself, like, its effects and what it does not prove relevant. It's never used, it's never drunk by anyone that we see. So, like, I would argue that, like, you know, brewing it is the only relevance we see, but we never see, like, its effects, and the potion itself be relevant to the plot. So I believe I stand by my assessment.
Okay,
And, like,
fair enough.
well, and, like, obviously, like, you guys are right, like, what you said, you know, that, like, you know, the reason it's in the text is to make that contrast with Snape. But yeah, I would have expected...
Do you wish that Harry used it on somebody, or somebody else used it on somebody else?
I think I would have liked it to sort of, you know, come back to have someone drink it at some point in the series. Yeah, it's what I would expect from Joe's writing. Like, I think this is sort of fairly unusual for her.
I mean, Harry could have drunk it in the forest, but that would have meant that Narcissa wouldn't have had that moment with him.
True. Yeah. I mean, again, I sort of go back and forth on whether the Draft of Living Death was ever meant for more, and it was dropped in the editing process, or if it was just, like you say, a red herring and a bit of character development for Snape. I'm kind of 50-50 on it, and I think I'd be curious to hear, you know, what you guys think, and also what our listeners think on the subject.
Yeah, definitely, listeners, write to us and tell us what you think. Are you team Draft of Living Death, or are you team it's pointless and we should cut it out?
Yeah, because I'm curious, can you guys think of any other potions that come up more than once that aren't relevant to the plot?
I mean, it depends what you mean by more than once. Like, there are plenty of things where it's like, oh, you know, he learned this in class, and then during exam time, he's like, you know, trying to do it again or whatever. So I don't know. Like,
yeah, no, I that's exactly what I mean. Like, a potion
sure.
that is mentioned
like the
more than in
strengthening
one
solution,
lesson.
for example, or something. Or no, there's one that he, like, talks about during his exams, like, oh, maybe his strengthening solution, maybe it was something else, was more runny than he wanted it to be, and, like, I think we had seen him make that same push. I don't remember, because it wasn't that relevant, so it didn't stick with me, but I think they're, like, just like, you know, cheering charms. Cheering charms are not important, but, like, they're mentioned more than once because it's like, oh, Hermione missed that lesson, and she's worried they're going to come up on the exams and whatever, you know.
You know, Sophia, I hear what you're saying with the cheering charms and all that, but I feel like usually they're in the context of, like, one lesson. For them to sort of be, like, featured, the way I'd argue Draft of Living Death is featured in 2 lessons across many years, I think is fairly unusual. Especially for potions. I feel like the potions end up very plot relevant, in most cases. But yeah, no, if I'm missing something, I'd love our listeners to tell us. Other than the Draft of Living Death, we had a few more, arguments for Dumbledore not really being dead. And this is the, grasping at straws section. Sort of, they're not very convincing on their own, but they can be part of a bigger picture of him not being dead. So first of all, there was the, you know, very astute observation, that we don't know what happened to Dumbledore's wand after Draco disarmed him. So we're like, where was the wand? Was it perhaps, you know, being hidden somewhere, you know, doing some magic to keep Dumbledore alive? You know, the answer is no, but also, like, yes, we should be paying attention to what happened to Dumbledore's wand.
Yeah, I actually, if I recall correctly, I think I mentioned that in one of my Hogwarts professor posts back at the time, is that wondering what was happening, and particularly, you know, we had that song at Aragog's funeral that talked about them breaking the wand in 2 and burying it with the wizard, and I was wondering if that's what had happened, and I guess it's half right. I guess it's probably a good thing they didn't break it in 2. Maybe you can't break the Elder Wand in 2. I don't know, despite what they showed at the end of the Harry Potter movie. But,
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I did wonder about that, at the time, I remember.
Yeah, I'll admit I didn't when I was reading it, just because I was all in my feelings. But afterwards, like, reading these essays, I was like, yeah, what about that wand? And then, the final theory is, was it even the real Dumbledore, that we saw? Or were Snape and Dumbledore polyjuiced into each other? So this theory largely stemmed from Dumbledore's, cursed hand, because, you know, in Chapter 2 of Half-Blood Prince, we see Snape making the unbreakable vow with tongues of flame circling his hand, and then, like, 5 pages later, we meet Dumbledore, and his hand has been mysteriously burned and deadened, and, like, we never find out why or how. So a lot of the theories said that Dumbledore had been polyjuiced into Snape at Spinner's End, and that they were just, you know, taking on each other's identity regularly, apparently.
I'm a fan. That is such a clever theory. I wish I'd thought of that as I was reading it.
Yeah, I had never heard of that one either, but yeah, that is actually, I mean, that's about as good as Time Traveling Ron, which I always liked too. But you know, because they even accounted for the London Underground scar on Dumbledore's knee and everything. But yeah, I like that. I'm glad I didn't hear it at the time, because it might have led me in the wrong direction.
So, yeah. To be clear, so they're saying, like, that Snape was killed and not Dumbledore.
Yes.
So when Dumbledore, I guess Dumbledore must be a really good actor, so when Dumbledore's getting all mad at Harry for, like, using the spells that, you know, that Snape had invented, he's just, like, a really good actor and knows Snape's history with that really well? Like, is that the idea?
But would that mean Snape took Harry to the cave and did all that stuff?
Yes.
There? And said, I'm not worried, I'm with you? I mean, come on.
Yeah. That's the part that I like the whole hand thing, but, like, actually thinking about their personalities, like, it's hard for me to imagine Dumbledore acting like Snape, and it's hard for me to imagine Snape acting like Dumbledore.
Oh, they coach each other, like that thing when Hermione's pretending to be Bellatrix thing.
Yeah. I mean, also, you could
they've
even do the
coached each
same
other,
coaching.
so they're doing
like,
a good
you
good
have
job.
to treat people like they're scum, remember? Yeah. I really loved the theory to explain Dumbledore's hand and the unbreakable vow. I never thought it was very compelling evidence that Dumbledore wasn't really killed. Because, again, per that theory, like, since Dumbledore with the blackened hand is the one killed, like, that must be the real Dumbledore. So, yeah, I never thought it...
Wait, or no, that's Snape, because Snape is the one who had the unbreakable vow.
No, so the theory went that Dumbledore was
Dumbledore
Snape making the unbreakable
was
vow.
Snape.
Yeah, that's why Dumbledore's hand is all dead and burned throughout the year.
No, but I don't even think that by that theory it really... Because I assume it's like they're polyjuicing, so if Dumbledore's hand is dead and blackened, then if Snape is polyjuicing as Dumbledore, then his hand would also be dead and blackened.
No. So what we're saying is that, like, Dumbledore was polyjuiced into Snape.
Yes, I know that.
During Spinner's End.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's it. And so, like, that explains why Dumbledore's hand is burned. And, like, they're done after that.
Right,
So Snape does not... It's not that Snape was killed at the end. It's not that Snape then polyjuiced into Dumbledore.
I mean, I never thought
You
that
never
made much
thought
sense.
that made sense. But it could still make sense, as in, if Snape polyjuiced into Dumbledore, he would also have a blackened hand.
Yes.
Okay.
And neither of them seem to be walking around with flasks.
I
So
mean,
that's where it falls down for me.
listen, Dumbledore's robes have lots and lots of pockets. Like, you don't know what's in there.
Snape is always around flasks of potions.
That's true.
That too.
So if Snape is actually a Dumbledore pretending to be Snape, you can see somebody catches him out at some point because he catches the fake Snape knitting something bright yellow in the corner one day.
I love it. Okay, so yeah, that's about all the arguments for Dumbledore not really being dead. The arguments for Dumbledore really being dead, I mean, I think the biggest one is just genre convention. You know, like, the wise old wizard with the big white beard, like, has to die, you know, so the hero has to grow up, you know, sort of, I think, before Half-Blood Prince came out, every sort of year 6 fanfic I read usually had Dumbledore dying at the end. So... yeah, like, I know it's a meta consideration instead of, like, an in-text one, but that sort of, you know, served to convince me more than anything else that he was dead.
Well, yeah, he was supposed to die in the sense for Harry to lose his mentor and father figure, so he had to grow up and kind of explore Dumbledore not being as perfect as he thought he was, which would have been more difficult to do if Dumbledore was still alive. But he kind of had to, he had to lose him, as you said, for the story conventions.
Yeah. Well, and also, like, we see the body, we see the headmaster portrait, you know, sort of...
It's quite convincing, yes.
Yes, all the trappings of death, as it were. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm curious, like, about the rest of you guys, like, what convinced you that Dumbledore was really dead?
Joe saying it.
Yes. So until she did, you were like, he couldn't be. It's Schrodinger's Dumbledore.
So I don't think I had a hard and fast view. I found it troubling that apparently Dumbledore sacrificed himself, committed suicide for such a poor payoff.
How do you mean?
Yeah, what do you
mean? So basically he killed himself to preserve Snape's cover.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Snape as spy really hasn't, to that point of the book at least, hasn't achieved anything.
Yes.
Other than sowing doubt on both sides, and both the Death Eaters and the Order, and being that kind of a disruptive force, he hasn't achieved anything. There's been no... I mean, at the heart of the Death Eater organization, he should have been providing golden intelligence leading to strategic wins. And then, of course, you protect that asset at all costs. But he hasn't delivered anything.
That we know of, yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And since we didn't know yet that he was already dying, I think that is
yes.
A big...
So that's the reason that I was personally convinced that Snape was evil. So, like, your exact same argument, I never took to mean that Dumbledore was actually alive. I took to mean that Snape was a bad guy because sort of, you know, in the calculus of who's more valuable and who's more important to keep alive, like, I mean, sad to say, but I think Dumbledore is more valuable and more important to the war effort than Snape. So I thought it never made sense that Dumbledore would sacrifice himself to keep Snape's cover because, yeah, like the math doesn't add up unless you know that Dumbledore is already dying.
Yeah. For me, because I was pretty young and I wasn't on the internet, so I was not aware of most of these things. So as I said before, like, the What Will Happen in Harry Potter 7 book was the first time I was exposed to any of these theories. So before that point, I was like, of course Dumbledore's dead. Like, it had not even occurred to me that he wouldn't be dead. And of course Snape is evil. It hadn't occurred to me that he was not. And then I read the book, and by that point, J.K. Rowling had already said that Dumbledore was dead. So I was like, these are some compelling arguments, but, like, at the end of the day, like, he's dead. So I didn't really have that much time to be, like, debating on either side. But I was really convinced that, after reading the book, that Snape was good.
Really?
Yeah. Because I don't know. I think they just had some really good arguments for that. And I mean, that's not what we're discussing today, but like, they did have some good arguments for it being planned, because the way that Dumbledore acts in that moment is kind of weird if it's not planned. Like, why would he be begging Snape for anything if he thinks Snape is on his side? Like, it's just like, it's a weird... I hadn't thought of it at the time, but I was like, that's sort of a weird way for Dumbledore to act. We never see Dumbledore act like that.
They must have discussed this before. Do you think they discussed it before the Unbreakable Vow? Because otherwise, Snape has just painted himself into a corner, isn't he?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the order of events in Deathly Hallows.
And I don't think we completely know the exact order. I think he...
No, they do discuss it when Dumbledore injures his hand, which is before the Unbreakable Vow. Yeah, so yes, they do.
I always assumed that because Snape had promised to kill Dumbledore, that's why Snape felt safe making the Unbreakable Vow.
That was my assumption.
As, again, a way of really solidifying his cover, and then, of course, helping to convince Bellatrix, in that case, was the main one they had to convince.
Yeah. That's true.
Right,
because Snape says, like, that Dumbledore has recently sustained an injury in the Spinner's End chapter. So it's clear that Dumbledore has already injured himself.
Yeah. And, he absolutely had painted himself into a corner. I mean, once he made that vow, either Draco had to kill Dumbledore, Snape had to kill Dumbledore, or Snape had to die. I mean, those were the only three choices that were left.
I mean, or everyone. Dumbledore dies of natural causes and makes it moot.
True.
Well, I guess. Well, I mean, would that get you off the hook? I mean, technically, even if he dies of natural causes and you don't, well, if you maybe I don't know. I don't know if that would get you off the hook or not. But
yeah. So the order of events is Voldemort concocts a plan to have Draco kill Dumbledore. Dumbledore injures his hand, because in the memory, Dumbledore and Snape, Dumbledore's like, well, this makes everything much more straightforward. I refer to the plan Lord Voldemort is revolving around me to have the Malfoy murder me. So, like, you have to do it if Draco doesn't, within a year. And then comes Spinner's End and the Unbreakable Vow, where, Snape already knows that he's going to have to do this.
What I don't understand, though, and maybe this is just an error, but the whole ring situation, because Dumbledore breaks the ring before he sees Snape, and Snape says, did you think that breaking the ring would break the curse? And he says something like that. But then he's wearing the ring, and then he stops wearing the ring. And it's like, but the ring is broken. Like, I'm confused.
Breaking the ring, there's a crack in the ring, which is what breaks it to the point where it's unhorcruxified.
Right. Okay. So it's not a broken ring. Okay. So then he wears it so that Slughorn and Harry might notice that he can see how Slughorn reacts to him wearing the ring, is what I always assume.
Yeah.
And then he takes it off, and the stone is cracked, the ring is whole, but when he gives the stone to Harry, the stone is in 2 pieces, because it's been taken out of the ring. Is this right?
Yes.
Okay, that makes more sense, because I always, like, the phrasing around breaking the ring, I was like, but it's not broken. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, and if I recall correctly, like, the theory that Dumbledore was already dying, didn't really take off until, I want to say, like, 2006-ish, after we'd gotten confirmation that Dumbledore really was dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the stopper and death.
The stopper death theory by Kathy Leisner.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Like, honestly, it is astounding how much fans got right, in the lead up to Deathly Hallows.
Yeah, the scaroscope and yeah, that's cool. Well,
yeah.
I was always convinced Dumbledore had died, or at least almost entirely as convinced as you can be convinced of anything in a book with magic in it. Mainly for the genre convention that you mentioned. I may have held out a glimmer of hope, like, until, with that eye in the mirror, until, like, I think at the wedding, when the wedding and the trio's trip starts then, because when Aberforth came up at the wedding, it's like, okay, Aberforth has got to come up later, if we're hearing about this brother that we're hearing about for the first time. And then, or close to the first time anyway. And I thought, yeah, I remember thinking, yeah, that could absolutely be Aberforth's eye in that mirror. So I made that guess fairly early on.
Oh, well done.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, I mean, I wasn't sure enough of it to ever, like, write it down in public, but I did think, okay, yeah, it could be someone else's blue eye in that mirror. And I thought, well, we've just had Aberforth come up again. It could be him. But the thing about, the Harry Potter world building is, even with Dumbledore dead, there's a very good chance that he could still continue to communicate to Harry in some way.
Yeah.
Maybe through the two-way mirror, maybe but absolutely through his portrait. I always thought it was really weird that portrait was asleep the first time he went in there. I mean, I guess dying takes a lot out of you, but... But, I mean, when you have so many ways of seeing and communicating with dead people, even those that aren't ghosts, it really reduces the need for fake deaths. I mean, you had Harry seeing his parents in the mirror, Virus said. He was able to talk to them, communicate with them, get help from them in the Priori Incantatem thing where they came out of the wand, and then of course at the end with the resurrection stone, and he gets to talk to Dumbledore both in King's Cross and in the portrait. So when you can do all that, there's really not a lot of need to bring someone back from the dead, literally. I mean, you can get what you need with them and keep them dead. Well, it's a little bit to me like Star Wars, when, a dead Jedi can turn up and float around you and with their glowing halos and, give you some encouragement if you need it. Yeah, so you don't have to bring the Jedi back from the dead. If you contrast this with like the DC Comics universe, where your superheroes are always either presumed dead, or sometimes they actually die, and like the Superman did and the Flash did, and then they come back to life. I mean, it's hard sometimes to think of a major DC character that hasn't died at least once. But, in that world, I was a pretty big DC Comics nerd back in the day. I haven't read them in years now, but I don't think there's any way of actually talking to someone who's dead. So if you don't want these characters gone forever, you have to bring them back. In Harry Potter, you don't have to do that. You can talk to their portrait, you can use the resurrection stone, you can Priori Incantatem them, You can do all sorts of stuff to speak to them if you really need to.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the effectiveness of Jo's writing and sort of the balance she struck, because, like you say, you have to be able to talk to dead people once in a while just to get information and all that, but also the series is largely about death and sort of processing it, grieving it, like coming to terms with it. So, if, Harry could talk to portraits and ghosts and reflections, sort of whenever he felt like it, I feel like you wouldn't feel, the bereavement as strongly. So I think the very judicious use of talking to dead people is well done in the Potter books.
Also, I think you can't expect it to work. So he doesn't know he's going to have that talk with Dumbledore at the end. So you can't assume that you would be able to have a chat with a dead person through priori incantatem. So I'm not really sure it would completely take away the urge from some people to try to bring somebody back from the dead. But yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like that's covered as even as a magical option. It just still, whenever I read these books, it never comes across as, oh, this is just something that can be done whenever you want.
Sure. I think from the character's perspective, no. Like, it's not like from Harry's perspective, he's like, oh, whatever, I can just talk to my parents whenever. But I think from the reader's perspective, if it's like, okay, we know we need more information from Dumbledore in Book 7 than we have had so far, then we can be like, there will be a way that J.K. Rowling can make that work within the world, like within the universe. Like, if the real reason why Dumbledore should be alive is because Harry needs more information for plot reasons, then like she can find a way for Harry to get that information for plot reasons.
That's fair, because I tend to kind of more fixate on the in the universe stuff, because when I'm reading those books, that's where I want to be.
And that makes total sense. Yeah.
but yeah, what you're saying makes complete sense.
Yeah. But talk of out of universe. So we all spent about a year after Half-Blood Prince came out sort of debating whether Dumbledore is dead or not. And then Jo actually gave us the final word. So she said at an event in August 2006, which was a year after Half-Blood Prince came out and sort of halfway to Deathly Hallows. And I'll just read the whole quote. I see that I need to be a little more explicit and say that Dumbledore is definitely dead. And the crowd gasps. And I do know that there is an entire website out there that says that's name is dumbledoreisnotdead.com. So, I'd imagine they're not pretty happy right now. But I think all of you need to move through the 5 stages of grief. And I'm just helping you get past denial. So, I can't remember what's next. It may be anger, so I think we should stop it here.
That's hilarious.
Oh, she's very good.
Yeah. I don't know about the owners of the website, but I would imagine they were absolutely delighted and their traffic went through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, Dave Haber must have been thrilled. I mean, on the one hand, your life's work. On the other hand, Jo Rowling.
Well, it's like, your life's work was only going to be there for another, year until the book came out. So, in the meantime, you just got a lot of people knowing about this website who didn't know about it before.
Yeah. But, so this was a fairly unusual move, on Jo's part back in the day, because, by and large, before Deathly Hallows came out, Jo let fans just sort of go to town with their wild theories. She wasn't really in the habit of debunking most of them. It was just go nuts, have fun, theorize what you're gonna theorize. And so, yeah, the fact that she shut this down, and was just sort of y'all need to find more profitable lines of inquiry, yeah, it was an unusual move back then. And I think she did it largely because it was undermining sort of the thematic importance. Yes. Where she's theorize all you want to theorize, but this series is about death and accepting and processing death, so y'all need to process it and not sort of, look for loopholes.
Yeah, you're not doing the accepting part. You need to move on through all the stages.
Yeah.
And I think that the joke also played an important part. So, yes, I think she felt the need to say that. But because she had the joke, I think that meant she had to say that. It's such a good line.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that, yes, I agree. Thematically, I think it was extremely important for her to say that. And I think it added power to, like, Harry being the one person who, like, his death is not really a death kind of thing. Where, if you had been going into that scene being like, well, Dumbledore is probably gonna pop up from the dead right about now, I think that there's this, like, she had established by that point of Harry going into the forest of, like, when you die in the wizarding world. Like, you're dead. And I think that, like, made the...
Unless you're Harry Potter.
Yeah, but, like, it made the, like, emotional, like, power of that scene where, like, when I was reading that scene, I was, like, sobbing. I was like, he is dead. Like, he is going to die. And I think that she wanted to have that punch of, like, you thinking, like, no, this is, like... when you die, you die.
Yeah.
When you said pop up, Sophia, I just couldn't help thinking of the, Potter puppet pals.
Puppet pals.
Dumbledore!
Dumbledore! Imagine, like, Harry's, like, taking a step into the forest, and it's like, Dumbledore!
That would definitely take away from the atmosphere, yeah.
And then he, like, pops back down, and Harry's like, wait, what was that? Like, where did that come from?
Like, no, carry on. Do
Carry
the
on,
sacrificing. We need it.
Yeah. So that's Dumbledore. Does anyone else have any arguments for or against, or are we all quite convinced Dumbledore is dead now?
Dumbledore is dead. Sorry.
Long live Dumbledore.
Long live Dumbledore. So there is a, moving on, there's a third death, that, was somewhat disbelieved when it came about, and that was Mad-Eye Moody. And the fascinating thing here is that, like, the debate of is he dead or not actually takes place in the text.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, Moody's killed in the Battle of Seven Potters, and then, in Deathly Hallows, page 93-94, like, the trio has the debate, kind of like we just had for Sirius and Dumbledore, like, is he really dead? And so, you know what? I just thought that we could just read the debate out loud, and, sort of put our listeners there. So, who wants to be Harry, Ron, or Hermione?
I'll be Hermione.
Excellent.
I will be Harry because I'm the only one who likes him.
That's not true.
That's not
I love
true.
Harry.
We like Harry.
Okay.
Oh, well, that's good to know. Usually people are like, hate Harry. But I'm usually the lone voice who likes Harry because he is my favorite. But that's good to know I'm not alone.
Shall I be Ron Weasley for the accent then?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
yes,
you
absolutely.
should.
We've got to have
Amazing.
Brit do one character at least. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay,
not going to attempt to fake a British accent, by the way.
Yeah, no,
I'm
me
going to
neither.
spare everyone from that.
I mean, Ev, you're slightly closer.
Geographically it is.
All right, Ron, take us away.
We were just talking about Mad-Eye, Ron told Harry. I reckon he might have survived.
But Bill saw him hit by the killing curse, said Harry.
Yeah, but Bill was under attack too, said Ron. How can he be sure what he saw?
Even if the killing curse missed, Mad-Eye still fell about 1,000 feet, said Hermione.
He could have used a shield charm.
Fleur said his wand was blasted out of his hand, said Harry.
Well, all right. If you want him dead, said Ron grumpily, punching his pillow into a more comfortable shape.
Of course we don't want him to be dead, said Hermione, looking shocked. It's dreadful that he's dead, but we're being realistic.
And scene.
Bravo.
Next stop, audiobook deal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We're the Three Broomsticks is going to turn into an audio drama, but we're just going to read the series.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
I'll send
but
it
you
for
know,
that.
I remember reading this and I was like, oh my god, like this is the argument that, like, we have in the fandom every time someone dies.
Well, if you want him dead.
Right. Be like, well, we saw him hit by a killing curse, but are we sure we saw that? And he fell 1,000 feet. We're like, yeah, but wizards are bouncy.
And it wasn't the correct type of the killing curse.
Exactly.
Do you think she's making fun of us?
So that's my question, is, like, what was the idea behind Joe including this? And, like, I genuinely think that Joe was trying to, like, portray the fans and being like, this is what you guys sound like.
I'm sure you're right.
Oh,
I don't think that's necessarily the case because, well, at least the way I see it, that's a little bit like, missing in action. And the 7th book is there's so many people dying, in comparison to all the other ones where there might be 1, 2 characters. They're dropping like flies very quickly from the start. And I think it's meant to sort of show, this is war. Lots of people die all the time unfairly, and sometimes you can't quite tell exactly what happened because what they're discussing.
Yeah, fog of war.
You see what I'm saying?
I mean, yeah. I think it's part of all of the theme of the series is that, like, processing of death and stuff, and that we see Harry having that big denial phase after Sirius's death. But this is kind of the first time that we see Ron going through that denial, and that he, like, I think we're seeing him trying to process this as well. And that Harry, by this point, is kind of in the more like, no, I know what the grieving feels like, and I know that even if there's that denial, like, feeling, no, he's dead.
I really like the idea that it was the author showing a little bit of fandom and taking a little bit of dig at the fandom people that are always debating, because actually I'm absolutely sure she did that in The Ink Black Heart with Cormoran Strike, where there's a character that is actually telling one of the detectives, oh yeah, you're not a true Ink Black Heart fan unless you've debated this, and unless you've experienced this, and unless you've been hit on by this guy, and various things like that online. So I like that idea. But I figured Moody was dead, and of course we know it fairly early on when his eye turns up in Umbridge's door. He wasn't going to let his eye go without a fight. But what I kept thinking we would see from Moody that we didn't, I thought we were going to see his body turn up as an Inferi. Because we know the Death Eaters got a hold of his body, and I thought, that's what they would do with it. They would turn it into an Inferi.
Well, I'm glad she didn't do that, because that would have been really freaky. Yeah, I mean,
maybe he's in the lake.
I think that I think there's maybe I think there is a little bit of maybe a joking about the fandom, but I think maybe it's like, I could imagine that the fans' reactions to the other deaths kind of surprised her, maybe, like that she was like, oh wow, like they are getting really stuck on this denial phase, like this. And, like, part of that is that it's a book series rather than real life. But, like, I think maybe she was sort of like, oh, I know that this is a big stage of grief, but, like, there are a lot of situations where you can't really be in denial because it's just, like, someone is dead, you see their body. But I think maybe she was sort of playing with that of, like, well, we see, like, I thought I was being super clear about these people being dead, and yet people are still in denial. So, like, sort of imagining that through her character's lens of being like, yeah, this is a situation where, like, they didn't see this happen. They don't have a body. So, like, they probably would go through that denial phase more so than other people would, than other situations.
They're still hoping he might come back. Mm-hmm. While they're all waiting. Yeah. I just thought it was so kind of moving when they're all sort of standing around and they're waiting for everybody to come back, and not everyone does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really thought that this was sort of Joe trying to impress upon the reader that, like, dead is dead. Yeah. Especially because it comes early on in Deathly Hallows. I think she was sort of trying to prepare us for the book. Because, like you say, people are dropping like flies in Deathly Hallows. and sort of the tragedy of, like, these multiple deaths, like, a lot of whom, you know, don't get the fanfare that Dumbledore did. I think, you know, if every time someone drops dead, we're like, but are they dead? It kind of cheapens the horror that she's trying to portray. So I think this was sort of her preemptive blow of being like, no, like, dead is dead. Like, it's a fantasy novel, but, like, people are actually gonna die, and it's gonna stick.
Yeah.
I think it works on a lot of levels, doesn't it? It absolutely does that, but it's also a normal human reaction, which is why the fans reacted like that.
Yeah.
It is disbelief, is you don't want it to be true, so you look for reasons why it isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
And that voice of Ron's, okay, well, all right, if you want him dead, that is very much a fan reaction, isn't it? I don't want him dead. That's why I'm arguing this way. Do you want him dead?
Yes. I'm curious, like, I know Louise said you weren't, but were any of the other, were any of the rest of you in agreement with Ron, even, like, however briefly until we saw his eye?
I don't remember, but I don't think so.
I've always looked on the point of Ron being that you shouldn't be in agreement with him on most things.
Yes, agreed.
Unless you're playing chess.
I mean, it's true.
Sometimes he has insight,
I remember.
Sure.
Yeah. I remember I was puzzled by this inclusion in Deathly Hallows, like, the first time I read it, just because, like, we'd never had this kind of debate before.
That's not true, as in, like,
thought
Harry had that debate of, like, Harry was, like, kind of like, well, like, what's going on with Sirius? Like, is he dead? Is he not?
Well, for Harry, the debate lasted all of, like, 30 seconds until Lupin was like, no, he's gone. Like,
I mean,
this
sure,
whole,
but
like,
this conversation is not much longer than that, but sure, okay.
Well, no, sort of, my point is that, like, this conversation is, like, after the fact. It's, like, days after the death happened, like, everyone's toasted Mad Eye, like, like, grieved, sort of, like, it's not just the initial, like, wait, no, he's right there, he can't be dead. It feels sort of more measured and, like, intentional, I guess I want to say.
I guess what I would argue is that even though later on Harry is not, like, in denial that Sirius is dead, like, I would say how he is acting with, like, the mirror and the ghost thing is like the denial phase.
Yeah, because you're still
Oh, yeah,
hoping
for
he
sure.
might talk to him again. as a
Yeah,
ghost.
so I
And
think
that's why he
that
talks to Nick.
I think that I would still see that as a very deliberate, like, denial conversation, but it is different, as in it's not like, is he dead, is he not?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm casting my mind back to, like, when I first read Deathly Hallows at 15. And so, yeah, I was perplexed by the inclusion of this. Obviously, now it's sort of clear to us why it's in there. But yeah, I never assumed Mad Eye was gonna be alive. I was like, no, he's dead. Like, if Hermione says he's dead, he's definitely dead.
I have to say, I was hoping he might turn up somewhere, like in the Resistance or something. But yeah. Sadly,
Well,
he's just dead.
We know Moody always drinks from a flask, so maybe he swayed some draft of living.
There we go.
It all makes
So he
sense.
saw Voldemort
Finally a
coming.
connection.
He saw Voldemort coming,
Yeah,
swig the flask, fell asleep, fell off his broom, and somehow didn't die?
Exactly, it makes
Exactly.
perfect sense.
Is it just like a
I
magical
see
version
no
of
holes
playing
in this
dead?
theory. Yes.
Are you sure that was Moody you saw drinking from that flask?
Also true.
We cannot be sure of what we saw.
Nope. I mean, in fairness, that is one of the, like, other lessons of these books, is, like, you can't be sure what you saw, because we all saw Sirius kill Pettigrew,
Well,
right?
we didn't see it, but we heard about it.
So
sure.
we thought.
Yeah, but
People saw it.
But lots of
Yes.
people did.
People saw it, yes.
And people's memory is an unreliable thing.
True. Unless you have a pensieve.
Yeah. But yeah, I also think it's kind of interesting that in, like, books 3 and 4, Jo keeps bringing people back from the dead, and then in books 5, 6, and 7, she just keeps killing people and being like, no, I swear they're dead, for real this time.
That is funny.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's about all the disbelieved deaths that we have in Harry Potter. Unless any of y'all had really strong, powerful theories about, why Ted Tonks was alive all along.
Nah.
Yeah.
I still think Hedwig made it.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish. And another one of Snape's victims.
Exactly. You know what? Maybe Hedwig drank some draft of living death. And so she's just like having a power nap somewhere. Yeah, I think that's a good note to leave it on.
All right.
Hedwig, wherever you are, we hope you're happy.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
hey Irvin, what's playing on the pub's jukebox today?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. We have a beautiful lament by Hawthorne and Holly called Why Dumbledore Why, which is, singing about exactly what we've been talking about, why Dumbledore why did you have to die? So yeah, give that a listen.
Oh, say, can you see John at Hogwarts is breaking? The fears will roll in as the tears roll down, and we're all shocked and scared. Life will never be the same again, and Harry's scarred and scared. Will his life ever be the same again? Why, Dumbledore, why? Why did you have to die? You were taken by Snape, and it sealed the fate of so many lives. Why, Dumbledore, why? Why did you have to die? We're without a plan. You're supposed to be the man with all the answers. We're without a plan. Aren't you supposed to be the man with all the answers?
That sounds great. And thank you again to our wonderful guests. And thank you for visiting the Three Broomsticks again. And please tell us if there is anything you'd like to share, where our listeners can follow you, if you have any interesting projects going on at the moment.
Well, my blog is www.fartingsofafaculty.blogspot.com. Right now, I am reviewing what I think are the most important Cormoran Strike books to read before the book 8 comes out, which are 2, 4, 6, and 5. In terms of Harry Potter events, my favorites, Harry Potter Academic Conference at www.harrypotterconference.com. It is in October. It is online this year, so no travel expenses. A great year to come. There's Queen City Mischief and Magic Festival in September in Stanton, Virginia. Again, has nothing to do with Harry Potter. It's an entirely generic magic festival. The fact that everybody is dressed as Harry Potter is pure coincidence. But I also put links to 2 MuggleNet Potterversity episodes that I was a guest on that came out in the last year or so. They're both on, it's a 2-parter. It's on the murky marshes of memory. And the reason I included those is because we talk quite a bit about the portraits and death and what it means for your grieving process to be able to talk at least to a version of the person that you're grieving as if they were there with you. And we actually draw some comparisons. Apparently, there's a modern version of this, which is to create an AI bot of yourself. For instance, if you know you have a terminal illness and leave that behind for your loved ones to talk to after you're gone. And
I don't like that at all.
Well, we spend some time talking about that. Is that a healthy thing? Is that, different than having a picture or videotape of your loved one, actually getting to speak to them through an AI bot? Anyway, it seems to fit in with our death and denial theme here, so I put the links to those 2 shows.
Awesome. Thanks, Louise. Nick, what about you?
You can find me on the Hogwarts Professor website and Substack. And if you enjoy photographs of the beautiful South Wales coast, you can follow me on Twitter.
Brilliant. That sounds
Excellent.
Sounds fantastic. And I've just realized we didn't talk about one of the most important deaths of all, the death of the farting sofa.
If you go to my blog, I'll tell you exactly what happened to the farting sofa. The farting sofa is alive.
Yeah, the farting sofa obviously isn't dead.
This.
Yes, yes. The farting sofa, fortunately being an inanimate object, it was never really alive to begin with, so bringing it back was not that difficulty. It just took a little bit of, synthetic vinyl and furniture repair, and it's alive and well, and it's serving in my, as I said, providing posterior respite for people at my blog.
I love it.
Oh, and we do so appreciate posterior respite.
Oh, don't we all? And huge thanks again to Carolyn Oberlander, who bought us this round of drinks at the Three Broomsticks. Thank you, Carolina. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We need drinks. They keep us going. Oh, we really do. And if you'd like to buy us the next round, or two, or three, head over to patreon.com/3broomsticks with numeral 3 to sign up. You can also help by rating and reviewing us. And if you like our show, don't forget to tell your friends, enemies, anyone. Word of mouth helps us hugely, and we always love to see reviews and comments.
Yeah. And in the meantime, you can find us on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, maybe TikTok. No one knows. Our assorted handles and email address can be found in the episode description or on the website. Our website is 3broomstickspod.com with the 3 spelled out. So there you'll find links to all the various essays and projects that we've mentioned. You can submit a topic, and you can let us know your thoughts. Tell us which deaths you believed or didn't believe, or, what crazy theories from back in the day tickled your fancy. We'd love to hear from you.
And it's also a very visually beautiful website. I think it's very pretty.
Yes, it is also that.
It's very nice to hang out there. And next time we meet at the Three Broomsticks, we'll be discussing Lucius Malfoy.
Ooh,
who
yes.
Irvin has a particular interest in, I would say, in light of his upcoming book.
Yeah, we are having a very Malfoy-intensive year here at the Three Broomsticks.
We really do, don't we? But yeah, no, it's going great. It's going great. And with that, it's me, Ev. Thank you for listening.
I'm Sophia.
And I'm Irvin. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time in the Three Broomsticks. Cheers!
Give me big old buckets of butterbeer. Give me big old barrels of butterbeer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butterbeer.
This episode of The Three Broomsticks was edited by Brittany Fisher. The theme song was written and performed by the Faithful Sidekicks. Make sure you check them out at thefaithfulsidekicks.com.
I'm starting to get hungry. It's this time of the evening.
Yeah. Well, again, after a weekend in Cincinnati, I am only ever eating salads ever again. Because, in traditional Midwest fashion, the food involved, dough and cheese and dough, carbs and cheese and carbs.
Sounds about right.
Sort of, my kingdom for a salad at the end of it. Like, the first night, we were there, we went out to a chili place, and, my friends ordered a salad, and I was like, who orders a salad at a chili place? The next night we went out to dinner, and I was like, oh no, pass that garden salad over here.